Hey there, how's it going everyone? In this video, we're going to be looking at SQLAlchemy. SQLAlchemy is a tool that helps us to deal with SQL databases. It provides an SQL toolkit as well as an object relational mapper that helps us to deal with relational databases using the Python programming language. So, relational databases include MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQLite, Oracle, and so many other databases. In this video, I'm going to be specifically dealing with an SQLite database, and you shall see different things like creating a table, creating a database, and being able to create the various tables within a database, and the other basics that you'll need. For more about SQL Alchemy, I'm going to leave a link to the official website in the description so that you may check it out and learn more about it. So without further ado, let's get started. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing, as I'm going to be posting a lot of programming content here. And without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do within my VS Code is to check whether I have SQL Alchemy installed on my system. So I need to open up my terminal, and I'm using Git bash in this case. So on Windows, so I'm going to just say pip install SQL Alchemy. So in this case, I am going to use SQLite, but feel free to use whatever database you may need. So in this case, I am going to use SQLite. So I'll use SQLite, and we are going to walk through the different things that you may need. So as you see that we already have it uh, installed within our system, so I'm going to press Ctrl C. Then we're going to start from scratch. So the first thing is always to create our database schema, or to create our classes that are going to define the way our tables are going to be in the database. So take an example of having a user table within your database. So in this case, when you're using your ORM, you basically map all that table to a class. So this class helps you to carry out the creation of that table in the database, as well as to describe the various attributes that that table is going to have, as we're going to see in this case. So when creating tables with SQL Alchemy, you always create a base class from which you have to inherit for you to create this table. So we're going to look into how to create that in a second. So you're going to come and say from SQL Alchemy, we are going to import a declarative base. And now from declarative base is when we create our base class from which we inherit and create our schema table. So to do this, I'm going to come and say that base is going to be equal to declarative base. And once we do this, we are going to inherit from base and go ahead and create our class that's going to define a table. So in this case, we are going to create as a simple user table. So let's go ahead and kind of model this table out. So I'm going to come just down here, and I'm just going to create a simple string. So let's just create a simple string just like this. So I'm going to create a class. So I may say class user. So we're going to specify the various fields that you want for this. So we may have an ID, which is going to be an integer. We also want to have, let's say, a username. So we may want a username, and in this case, our username is going to be a string. So we may also want an email, and our email may also be a string. And you may also want to have a date created. So, for example, want to check when you created this user account. So I may say date created. Then this is going to be a date time object. We're going to have our table with these fields. So let's go ahead and look into how we're going to create this table. So to do that, I'm going to just come just down here, and then I'm going to create a simple class. And this class is going to be a class with a name of user, just like specified. But then it always has to inherit from the base class. So I'm going to say a class user inherits from base. And after doing this, the first attribute we have to specify is the table name. This is going to help us to know the name of the table that we are going to create while using this class. So I'm going to create a variable called underscore table name. So The table name is going to be equal to the name of the table. Let me fix this. So this is going to be standard table name, and it's going to be equal to the name that we want our table in the database to be. So in this case, I'm going to specify um, users. So you may specify anything, any name you may want. And then after that, we want to create one or at least one attribute that's going to be a primary key. In this case, I'm going to use an ID. So I'll say ID, and then I say ID is going to be equal to. So I'm going to import various fields and various columns and various attributes that we may need for a certain field in SQLAlchemy. So to do this, I'm going to go up this side and then say from SQLAlchemy. So I'm going to say from SQLAlchemy, and I'm going to import columns, which is going to help us to create a column. So I'm going to import a column class, and then import string, which is going to help us to create string. Then I'm going to also import date time. So this is going to be from where we're going to create our date time field. And then I'm also going to import integer. After doing this, the next thing is going to be to come and then say that our ID is going to be a column, and then this column is going to be an integer, so we may create it as an integer. And then we may also say that this is going to be our primary key, so we may specify the primary key attribute to true. This is going to make this field the primary key to our table. And the next thing is going to be to create our username, so I'm going to create our username, and then our username is going to be column. Now this column is going to be string. Now the beauty here is we can be able to also mention the length, the max length of that particular field. So in this case, we can pass in, let's say, a username of 25 characters, and then we can also give other attributes such as nullable, true, false. This basically specifies that this particular attribute or this column should not be left null. And then you may also say unique is equal to true. So after doing this, the next thing may be to create our email field. So I may say email. So I'll say email. And then email is going to be a column. So I'm going to say this is going to be a column. And then it will be a string. And let's say we want our email to have a max length of 80 to be unique. So I may say unique is going to be equal to true. So this is going to make our email unique. And then I may also say that nullable to be equal to false, meaning that it won't be null. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to implement our date created field. So to do this, I'm going to come and say date created is going to be equal to column. And now this column is going to be a date time. So we're going to say it's going to be date time. So we're going to specify that by default it has to be the datetime object to show that it's going to be the date at which it's created. So to do that, I'm going to import datetime from datetime. We're going to come to the top of the code right here and say from datetime, I'm going to import datetime. Now after doing this, I'm going to come right here. Then I say that we are going to specify the default attribute to be equal to datetime dot UTC. Now, this is going to specify that date at that particular time, the date and the time at that particular time. So after doing this, we are going to save. Let's see. So when I save this, the next thing is going to be to create a simple function or a simple method that's going to help us to give string representations for our particular is going to give string representations for our particular class. For example, if we ever call objects of this class, we are going to be able to see them return to us as their places in memory. For example, if I came right here and I said new user going to be equal to a user, so let's say a user an ID of let's say 1, and let's say that user has an email, or let's say a username of say Jonathan, And then they have an email of, let's say, jonah@jonah.com. And then if they had, let's say, a date created, so let's say date created, actually, even if you don't specify it for now, I'm just doing this to demonstrate. So if I printed new user, we are going to be able to see the place at which this object will be located in memory. So I'm going to call my terminal and then I say Python main.py. So basically this is going to just print out the location. So let's see, I'm going to import declarative base from SQLAlchemy. So I made a mistake right here, so I'm going to go back and fix that. So it's going to be from SQLAlchemy .orm because we're using the ORM in this case. So I'm going to come and run again. So when I run this, we see that now we can be able to see that the main user object are located at this place in memory. So for now, we may need a friendly way of showing this object to us who are going to code within this application. So to do that, I'm going to come and create a simple method. So this method is going to be the danda_repre method. It's going to return a string representation of this object. So I'm going to come and say def __ repre. So this is going to be our repre, then this is going to be self. And then this is going to return a string representation of this object. So what I'm going to do is to say return. Now I'm going to use an f string, and then we're simply going to return a string representation of the user. So I'll say user, and then I'll say username equal to, then I'll say self dot username, meaning the username of the current object or the object on which you are calling this method. This is going to be self dot username. Then you may say email being equal to, so this is going to be let's say self dot email. So after this, I am going to save. So when you try to print user in this case, we are going to see a friendlier representation of our object. So if I print this, we see that it's now returning that specific user with username Jonathan and email Jonah. So right now we are having these objects, but what if we wanted to create a database and be able to store these objects in our database? So we are going to do that by creating what is called an engine. Basically, what an engine does is to specify which database we're going to use, as well as other configurations for that database. So to do that, I'm just going to come right here at the top. Then I'm going to come from SQLAlchemy. I'm going to import all this, and then I'm going to add uh, one specific function. Okay, say import create engine. So I'm going to import the function called create engine. Now this create engine function is going to help us to create the engine that's going to help us to carry out the different database tasks as well as to create our database. So to do that, I'm going to come and say that engine is going to be equal to, so this is going to be create engine. Now within create engine, the first argument that we pass in is the URL to our database. So in this case, we're going to be using an SQLite database. So we can specify whether that SQL database is going to be within our memory, or we can even specify the direction or the location on our machine where I would like this SQLite database to be shown. So to do that, I'm going to come and I'm going to just use OS to show the location of that database we want to create. I'm going to import OS, and then I'm going to create a simple base dir variable, which is going to be having the directory name of our current directory. This is going to be good by saying os.path dot that name. So basically we're getting the name of the real path to this file. So I'm going to say os.path dot, so this is going to be real path to the file we are currently working in. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to basically link these two to create what we call a connection string. So a connection string basically shows us which kind of database we're going to use, or which kind of drivers and which kind of credentials we're going to use to access that data. So to do this, I'm going to just come and create a connection string. So I'm going to say connection string. In this case, we're going to use SQLite. So I'm going to say SQLite and then specify where this SQLite database is going to be. So to do that, I'm just going to concatenate the string to os.path.join. So .join joins basically two URLs or two URIs or whatever you may call it. So or two paths. So in this case, I'm going to join two paths, and then I'm going to join the best dar. So in this case, it's going to be the best dar to our database. So we may choose to call our database site.db. So in this case, I'm going to call it site.db. And then after doing that, I'm going to come and basically uh, create the engine with the connection string and then add other configurations. So in this case, what I'm going to do is to come to our create engine function, and then I'll specify that we just need the connection string. And after that, I'll specify the echo attribute to true. So what the echo attribute does in this case is to help us to show the various SQL commands that are generated on carrying out any SQL query or any database task. For example, if we are to create a database, it's going to show us the various commands that are going to be run onto our database to create our tables. And if we are to, at all to add or to insert or to delete or to update anything, it's going to show us the SQL that is done for that. Okay, save this, and then the next thing will be to be able to explore the various things about our schema class, the one that we created called user. So you need to open up my Python shell. I'm going to clear this for now. So let our focus be here. So I'm going to say Python, and then this is going to open up our Python interpreter. Now, once this is done, we are going to be able to explore the different things on our class user. So I'm going to import that. So I'm going to say from main, we're going to import the user class. So this is going to be the user class. After importing the user class, we are going to be able to explore various things about user. So if I say user, we are going to see that this is the class which comes from main.user. We may also want to specify the metadata of this. So may say user dot underscore table name. This is going to basically return the name of the table. If I said underscore table name, and you see just like we described our table name to be users, you see that the interpreter shows us that the name of the table is users. So we may also want to see how these different fields are going to be created within our database. So to do that, I'm going to come here and then say user dot underscore table. So this basically shows us the metadata about the table, the data about the data that's going to be in the table. So I need to enter this, and when I maximize this, let me maximize this, control this so that we get to see this. So when you see this, we see that it's going to have our metadata. So we have a table of users, and it's going to have all this metadata, data about the columns, the primary key, and everything about each field that we have described within our schema. So right here we have our schema being shown to us. Now what if we want to create a database? So I'm going to close this, I'm going to kill this terminal, I'm going to pull this back up. Now for us to create our database, we are going to use our base class to be able to extract the data, and then we're going to also bind this to the engine we've created from create engine. So to do this, I'm going to carry this out within a separate file. I'm going to come right here, the new file, and then I'm going to create a new file, which I'm going to create engine py. Now within create engine, I am going to import the base class that we've created in our main.py, as well as the model we've created and the engine we created. So what we're going to do in this case is to get the metadata of the class we created and then be able to create that data using the engine we created. So this is kind of complex, I know, but let's see how it works. So I'm going to say from main, I'm going to import our class, which is user. I'm also going to import engine. I'm also going to import base. So after this, the next thing is going to be to create our database by running one simple create all function. So this create all function creates the database based on the class we've created, all the various base classes we've created, as well as the metadata that belongs to all those classes. Let's see how that works. So I'm going to come and say um, this is going to be base dot metadata dot create all, and then we pass in our engine as the engine is going to be based on to create all this. So I'm going to save this, and when we run this file, I'm going to pull up our terminal. So I'm going to pull up a new terminal. So I'm going to kind of reduce this and let's pull it to that. So if I say Python create, so I called it create engine. Let me rename it to create database. This is going to be our create. So let's sorry for this. I'm going to rename this to create. So let me just call it create db. So it's say create python create db.py. So when I run this, we expect that it's going to create our database and it's going to create a table within that database that matches these exact fields that we have here. Let's try to do this. So I'm going to call python create db.py, and this is going to create our database. Now, since we mentioned our echo attribute to true, this is going to be able to create all these various fields and then show us the various SQL that is generated. So this SQL is that is specific to SQLite. So if you're using something like Postgres or MySQL, you may discover that the syntax is going to change, but it still remains SQL. So let's proceed. So right here, I have a database GUI tool that's called DB Browser for SQLite. So you may download it for your operating system. And what it's going to help us do is to help us to be able to view the various fields that are on this SQLite database. So you need to open it up. While it's opening, we are going to first examine. So I'm going to pull this up. So if I pull my main.py, so when we see this SQL statement, it's generated from this class. So whatever field that you are having here, all the attributes are here. So wherever I mentioned unique, we also see that it's mentioned as unique. So we have a unique username, a unique email, just like we specified within our schema, have a unique and unique. So wherever I mention not now, for example, on the email, nullable is equal to false. So we see not now. Same for the username. The username is nullable equals to false. And we have our ID, which is an integer, and it's going to be our primary key. The same thing we see here as our primary key, which is our ID. I'm going to open up the database we've created, and you'll be able to see if these various fields have been created in the database. So to do that, I'm going to pull up the database GUI tool. So this is how it looks. We need to open up our database. So I'm going to navigate to wherever we have that. I'm going to navigate to my desktop. I'm going to navigate to that folder where I'm currently at. So I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to pull up the SQLite database. And if we are to see, if we are to monitor this, we are having our users table already created for us. So I need to come within users, and then we see the various fields that we've created. We've created an ID, a username, an email, the date created. So you can see the schema, all the SQL that's used to generate these kind of queries. So our database has now been created. So let's look at how we can be able to populate our database. and how we can be able to carry out the various database tasks like creating, reading, updating, and deleting objects. So let's go back to our VS Code. So we need to go back to VS Code right here now. And the first thing we're going to do is to look at how we are going to create uh, data within our database. So to do that, we need to just create a simple file right here, and this file is going to be create. So this is going to be creating users. So we're going to call it create users.py, and then we're going to make use of very many things here. So SQLAlchemy uses what we call sessions, and these sessions allow us to be able to carry out the various database, let's call them transactions or various tasks, or let's say operations. So basically, we make use of what we call a session. So SQLAlchemy provides a session maker class that helps us to create various sessions. And from these sessions, we can be able to query our database, delete and retrieve and carry out all that interesting stuff. I need to go back to main.py, and I'm going to import session maker from SQLAlchemy ORM. So to do this, I'm going to come and say from SQLAlchemy, I'm going to import a session maker. And once I import that, we are going to create a session we're going to create a session class that we're going to inherit from and be able to carry out the various database transactions that you may need. So to do that, I'm just going to come right here and I say that our session class is going to be an instance, or going to create it from the session maker. And after that, we are going to have our session. So wherever I call this session, it's going to help me to create another session that's going to be local to wherever I'm going to use it. So let me save this. So I need to go back to our create users file. And in this file, we are going to look at how to populate our database with users. So let's go ahead and import our object. So I'm going to say from. This is going to be from main. I am going to import our user class. So this is going to be our user class. The next thing is going to be the session class. So in this case, we're going to have our session. And then I think this is all we need. So to create a simple user, so just like you see, I talked about how an object relational mapper works, basically having our data within our code being matched with the tables in our database. So creating a new user is like creating an instance of a class user. That class is having these attributes that are basically describing whatever fields we may have for that user in our database. Let's go ahead and create a user. We need to come and say new user, and our new user is going to be a user. So we are going to basically talk about most of the fields that this user may have. So for example, we may have username, email, and date created. So we may specify that our user has a username, let's say Jonah, and then let's say an email, let's say Jonah at company.com. So right after doing this, we have created a new user. So to go ahead and save this user to the database, we are going to first create an instance of our session class that we created from session maker, and then be able to add this user to the session as well as to commit them finally to our database. So to do this, I'm going to come and create that instance. So I'm going to come and say our session local, our local session. So actually, let me call it local session. So I'm going to say local session is going to be equal to an instance of the session class that we've created from session maker. Now, after doing this, the next thing is going to be to add this user to the session and then fully commit the transaction to the database. To do this, I'm going to come and say it's going to be a local session dot add, and then we're going to add the new user we're from creating. So this is going to be our new user. Then we're finally going to commit this user to the database. So I'm going to say local session dot commit. So if we run this, we expect that it's going to get his user and then create them in the database. So let's see how this is going to work. I'm going to save this, then pull up our terminal. When I pull up the terminal, I'm going to simply say Python create users I, and then we see something. So we could not locate a bind, something I forgot. So in this case, we need to create what is called a bind. So basically, when we create a session, we need to bind it to whatever database that we are going to carry on our transactions on. So in this case, we have to call our engine. So our engine is which we are going to, our engine is going to specify the database we're going to use and the various configurations for that database. So I need to import engine and then bind our session to that engine. So to do that, I'm going to come and say from main import engine, and then I'll say session is equal to session and then bind. I'll just specify our bind to be equal to the engine. Let's go ahead and see this in action. I pull up my terminal and run the same command. So this time we see that we have our SQL that is being generated here. Let's try to look at this SQL. So let me first minimize this. So we see that it's inserting into our users table these various fields with these values. So let's go ahead and see if this data has been added to our database. So I'm going to go and check within our database. So we need to come and browse data. So when you browse data, we see that the various fields have been created within our, our database table. And this is very nice. So let's go ahead and try to populate our database or our database table users with more data. So I'm going to come within my VS Code and I'm going to create a list of dictionaries. These dictionaries are going to have user data. So I'm just going to come right here and then going to create new users. So I'm going to say users is going to be equal to a list of users. Then I'm going to come and say these users, each user is going to have a username. So I'm just going to create a username. So I'm not going to use journal because we specify the unique constraint to true. So I may say that user is going to be Jerry. Let's say the email of this user is going to be Jerry at company.com. Then you may also specify other fields. I'm going to just copy this. I'm going to paste it 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So after doing this, we are going to just change the various names and emails. So instead of Jerry, we have going to have Jordan. So in case of instead of Jerry, I may have like let's say Jackson. Instead of Jerry, I may also have let's say Jordan. So I may come and add another name. So I may say John. Then let's say may say it's going to be Jack. Now we are going to look through all this and then be able to add this to our database. So we're going to populate our database automatically using this list. We are going to loop over every dictionary in this list, and we shall be able to extract this various data which we are going to keep in our database. So to do that, I'm just going to come and say, so I'm going to comment this for now. And what I'll have to do in this case is to say for you in. So this is our users list. So we're going to create a new user from this list. So to do that, I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to copy this line and paste it right here. And then instead of having these various fields, we are going to just access the dictionaries within our list. So I'm going to come and say, instead of Jonah, I'll just say you and access the name attribute. So in this case, it's going to be you, username. And then in this case, it's going to be you, email. this is going to be you email. So let's try printing this out to see what is going to be created. So I may say print new user. So when I save this and try to run this, we run this, and then we see the output. So just like we created our data repre method, we see that it's returning string representations of whatever object that we've created. So let's go ahead and add this to our database. So to do that, I'm just going to simply clear this with Control L, minimize this for now. I'm just going to come and so I may come and just say local session dot add, then I say new. So in this case, I may also come and say we may want to fully commit this to the database. So I may say local session dot commit. This is basically going to add the user to our database and save them. So after doing this, I am going to come and just add the print statement. It's going to just say added. So in this case, we may just say added and then just add. Let me make it an F string. So I may say added you. So just say added you. So let's see this in action. Actually, let me fix this quick. So after this, what I'm going to do is to come and run this. So I run this again. Maximize this so that you guys can see well. So when I come right here, say Python create users.py. You see now it's running all this SQL and it's saying added John, added Jack, added Jaden, added Jackson, and added everyone. So when we go back to our database right here and we refresh, you see that all this data has been added to the database. Now let's go ahead and see how to query for this various data from our database. So you need to go back to VS Code and we need to create a file. So this file is going to be retrieving.py. So let me the spelling. So it's going to be retrieving.py. So we're going to learn how to query for various objects within our database. So to do this, I am going to first clear this, then going to close this. So we are going to close some of these files. Going to close. So we're going to import the same things as we used in the create users. So I'm going to just come and say from main, I'm going to import the user class. I'm going to import our session. So I'm going to import session class, and then I'm also going to import what else did we import? In this case, we imported the engine. So I'm going to import engine. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to kind of create a local session class. So I'm going to say local session. Sorry for this. I'm going to say local session is going to be equal to our session, and then we can bind this to our engine. So I'll say bind is equal to engine. After doing this, the next thing is going to be to create a query for all users. So I'm going to say users is going to be equal to users. So I'm going to query for this. So I'll use our local session. So the way we do this with SQLAlchemy, specify, I may say local session dot query. And then within the query, I specify which model we'd like to query. In this case, we're going to query our user model. So I'm going to say query user, and then if I want all of them, I may say dot all. So this is going to be our users. So I may come and say for user in users, then we may want to print user dot username. So basically, this query returns all users in our database. So I'm going to comment this, so this returns all objects. And then after returning all objects, we can be able to loop through the whole query set and then be able to return all the usernames of every user. So let's try running this and you see. I'm going to pull up the terminal, then I'm going to say Python retrieve.py. This is going to print out every user within our database. So we may also specify that we want limits. So let's see how we carry out limits. So instead of printing all of them out, we may want to limit a certain quantity. So I may say this is going to be, we may limit them to, let's say, 3. So when we say 3, I'm going to uh, save and then run it again. So when I run this, you see that it's going to only return 3 results. Let's go ahead and see how we can query for one specific uh, one specific user object. So to do that, I'm going to come and say retrieve one object. So I'm just going to come and say return or query for one object. Actually, let me just call this a query for one object. But this basically depends. You may want to query for an object basing on its ID, or you may want to query for an object basing on the specific attribute it has. For example, if we wanted to search for a user with the name of Jonah, we may want to filter all the users and then search for that specific user with the name of Jonah. So to do that, let me first remove this code and put this code just right above here. So I need to comment this for now. If we wanted to search for a user called Jonah, what we'll actually do is to query. So I'll say local session dot query. Then within this, I'll specify the user model, and then we want to filter, so I'll call the filter method. And then I specify that attribute I would like to filter. So in this case, we want a user with the username of Jonah. So I'll say if the attribute of username on the user model equal to the name Jonah. So we may want to search for the first or all users that have the name Jonah. In this case, we want first, so we shall say first, and this is going to return only one object. So let's try to print. So I'll say print Jonah. So when we run this file, we're going to save and run this. Say retrieving. This is going to return the user object with the username of Jonah and email of jonah@company.com. So we can use this same trick to be able to get users that have the users that have the same username. So for example, if you had users that had the username Jonah and there were many, if let's say not only one object had the username Jonah, then that's when you would remove the first, then query. But since our object is having a unique constraint on the username, so we don't expect that we can get a user with the same username. So let's go ahead and see how we can be able to update and be able to also delete objects in our database. So I need to save this and go. So I need to create a file. So I'm going to create a new file. It's going to be updating.py. So I'm just going to call it update.py. So you need to import the same things. I need to say from main, we are going to import session, we're going to import our engine as well as our user model. So I'm just going to come and create a local session. So this is going to be a local session. And it's also going to be an instance of the session class. So after doing this, the next thing we're going to do is to bind this to the engine. So I'll say bind, it's going to be engine, it's going to be engine. After that, we are going to query for that specific user who may want to update. So to do that, I'll just say user to update. So let's say we want to update a user whose username is Jonah. So we're going to query for that user first. So I'll say user to update is going to be equal to user dot. So this is actually going to be a local session dot query dot. So this is going to be dot query. Then you specify the user model and then dot. So this is going to be, we're going to filter by the username. So I may say filter by the username user dot username. Then let's say we want to get a specific user with the name Jonah. So I'll say Jonah first. Now after this is created, we may want to update the various fields on this user. So I may say user update dot username. So this updates their username. So let's say we want to update this username to Jonathan, and then we update the email. So in this case, we want to update the username. So in this case, to Jonathan. So let's say if we want to update the email. So I'll say user to update email is equal to, let's say, Jonathan company is going to be company.com. So after doing this, we may want to just basically save this data to the database. So to do this, I may just say local session dot meet. And this is just enough to update this info and save it to the database. So to save, we need to save this and try to run this file. So I need to say Python get py. So this is going to basically update this data. So we even see the update queries being created. So I'm going to go back to our database and we try to inspect. So currently this user with the name of Jonah has a username of Jonah. So let me try to. So when we see this, we have this user with the username Jonah. When I refresh to our latest changes, you see that the username has changed to Jonathan. Let's try to use SQLAlchemy to delete an object. So I may come and close this now. So I'm going to create a new file, which I'm going to call delete.py. So within this, we are going to be looking at how we can delete a user object. So I'm going to say from main, we are going to import our session, we're going to import our engine as well as our user object. And then first thing we're going to do is to create our local session. So I'm going to say local session is going to be equal to our session. Then we shall just simply bind this session to our engine. And then after doing this, we are going to come and basically just query for that specific user we want to delete and then be able to delete them. So to do that, I'm just going to come and say user to delete. So this is going to be the object to delete. So we're going to query for this from the database. So this is going to be local session dot query. Then you pass in the model you want to query. So this is going to be filter. So let's say I want to search for that user called Jonathan. So I'll say the dot username is going to be equal to Jonathan. After doing this, we may want to specify that the first user with that is the user we want to delete. Now, after doing this, we are going to save this to the database by after deleting. So we may say local session dot or the delete method. Then we specify the object we want to delete. So in this case, it's going to be user to delete. After doing this, we are going to come and save this to the database. So finally save this to the database. I'll say local session dot commit. And let's try to see this in action. So if I save this file, open up my terminal, we are going to witness the deleting of the object. So I'll say Python delete.py. And now we have a syntax error. Let me fix that. So this is going to be local session.com. So let's try to delete this. So now we see that our delete has been carried out and then committed to our database. So if we go back here, we see that we're having a user with the username Jonathan existing. So when we refresh, we see that that user has been deleted. Another thing that you may want is to query and order our users by either ascending or descending order. So let's see how to do that. We need to go and create a new file. Let me call this ordering.py. So I'm going to close this. Now I'm going to say from our main, I'm going to import our session class. I'm also going to import our engine as well as our user model. So after this, I'll create our local session. So say local session is going to be equal to an instance of our session class. After we do this, the next thing is going to be to bind this session to our engine. So I'm going to just come and say bind. It's going to be equal to engine. Now after doing this, the next thing is going to be to actually query and then order for hours. So the first case is going to be ordering in an ascending order. So I'm just going to be in an ascending order. So the first thing we're going to do is to query for the user. So I'll say users is session dot query. So in this case, we are going to query the user model. Then we shall want to order by. So I'm going to say order by, call the order by method. And then I'll specify the attribute on which I want to order this. So I'll say user dot user. So after that, I may say all, or I may say all, and then let's save and try to print this user. So I'll say for user in users, uh, we are going to print the username. So I'm going to say print. This is going to be, so let's say I'm going to just print a simple f string, and then in this case I'm going to say user, and then it's going to print a username. So instead I'll say user, say user dot username. So let's try to see what output this is going to give us. So if I save this, pull up my terminal and then say Python right? This is going to give us an ordered, it's going to order our usernames, and it's going to give them to us in alphabetical order. They say Jack, Jackson, Jaden, Jerry, John, and Jordan. So this can help us to get this in an ascending order. However, if we wanted to like get this in a descending order, what would we do? We need to close this. So we need to come back right here. So I'll rename this. This is going to be ascending. We need to also create this statement using descending order. We need to comment this. In this case, we need to say ascending. So this is going to be in descending order. So I'm going to import desk or that descending order from SQLAlchemy. We need to come at the top of our code and say from SQLAlchemy. I am going to import desk, and then after that, I'm going to come and try to create the query for querying for the users. So I'm going to say users. This is in descending order. So just going to call it descending order. This is going to be our local session dot query, and then this is going to be querying the user model. And then I'll say dot order by. So this is going to be user dot, and in this case I'll query for the username. So I'll use a username to order these objects, and I say dot all. So instead of saying users, in this case I may say desk, and let's try to see what this is going to return. So if I run this, we expect it's going to bring these names. So let's try to see. So we haven't changed anything in this case, so it has brought back the names just like we did. So if we pass in the descending, so I'm going to say desk and pass in the username. So This will be the username. So if I save this, try to run this again, it's going to give us a descending order for the names. So in this video, we've been able to get the basics of SQL Alchemy. So this shows you how easy it is to use an object relational mapper instead of using raw SQL. Using raw SQL statements is actually important. However, such tools like SQL can help you to bring all this abstraction to you and enable you to write code that really matches what your database are about. If you like this video, please go ahead and leave a like and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the YouTube channel to help me create more. Please like and leave what you think about this video in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next. Bye.